What's good everyone, it's Zigzag here, welcome back to another GeoGuessr video, and welcome to the first of a couple of videos I'm going to do reflecting on the year that was 2023. And of course in today's video I'm going to be talking about the top 10 players of 2023 for competitive GeoGuessr. So I'm going to start by mentioning number 10 and then move my way up to number 1. Halfway through the 10, I'm also going to talk about the honorable mentions who really could have made the top 10 list. And then after revealing my number 1 on the list, I'm going to talk about some names who I think might appear in the 2024 list. Okay, so before I reveal my number 10 pick, let me talk about the criteria quickly. So as you guys know, I'm pretty involved in the competitive scene, so I think I have a good idea of most players' skill levels. Nevertheless, beyond my own opinion, I'm going to add some objective measures, how they did at the World Cup, how many Rainbolt tournament wins they had and who they teamed with when they got those wins, how many solo world records they hold at the moment, and then also any other miscellaneous information which I find interesting about the player. And the final thing is that I'm mostly going to be talking about no moving and no moving panning or zooming. Moving play will be factored in because it was in the World Cup. However, on Plonket and in Rainbolt tournaments, only no moving comes into play, and so it's going to be weighted much more heavily. Okay, so my number 10 pick for top players of 2023 is the Fungus Among Us from Canada. So let's run through Fungus's achievements for the year. Clearly, the standout achievement for Fungus was that he was able to get a 3rd to 4th place in the World Cup. And I think what's worth mentioning is that a lot of people, myself included, did not see Fungus making it out the group stages of the World Cup. And then he went on to go to the semifinals and to take Consus to 5 maps coming from behind. And I think a lot of people have forgotten, but Fungus really almost knocked out Consus in the NMPZ game, which of course would have changed the outcome of the World Cup. And I mean, the whole tournament was a testament to Fungus's skill. Fungus also held the number 1 position for some of the year in the ranked leaderboards. Now again, that's moving games, but I still think because of the World Cup it is relevant, and that also has to factor into him placing so high. Conversely, Fungus did not manage any Rainbolt tournament wins, neither in the season at the start of the year nor in the current season with his team around the world. And also the only world records he holds at the moment are Canadian world records, which is of course his home country and his strongest country. Okay, my number 9 pick for the list, and this one might be one of my more controversial picks perhaps, but that is Trabota from Singapore. So Trabota managed a 5th to 8th placement in the World Cup, getting knocked out by someone who went a little bit further, Radu C. And this is perhaps the player in the top 10 who we have the least objective information on, because at the start of the year he was not playing in Rainbolt tournaments. He's only been playing in the previous 5 that we've had now that we're playing in the seasons. He also, in the space of 2023, has not gotten any world records. So basically this one's just a pure eye test. In my opinion, Trabota is still stronger than a lot of the players who missed out on top 10 without me necessarily having the numbers to back it up. But yeah, to me, Trabota's the type of guy who can pull an insane guess on a round where most other pros just can't do it for some reason. And yeah, despite the results, I do think he deserves a spot on the top 10. My number 8 pick is also a World Cup competitor, that is Harmless from Norway. Now, running through Harmless's statistics, he had a very underwhelming performance at the World Cup, getting knocked out in the group stages, making him the only player in attendance at the World Cup in my top 10 to miss out on the playoff stage. However, Harmless has had traditionally really good tournament statistics, and that was reflected in 2023 as much as ever, where he won 2 normal Rainbolt tournaments and 3 in the current season. He also holds 2 solo world records and definitely seems to pass the eye test as a very, very strong player. Getting towards the top players now, we're up to number 7, and this is the first player who did not attend the World Cup on my list. And that player is Bad at GeoGuessr, aka Bag. He's from Scotland, and he is just an all-round very strong player in my opinion. He achieved 3 normal Rainbolt tournament wins, and also 1 with his team, the Banana Bros. Because Bag and Consus were quite the iconic duo at the start of the year, it can be hard to work out who was making the good guesses, but I think his recent return to the community with the Rainbolt tournament starting back up again has proven that he is indeed a very strong player and deserving of number 7 on the list. My number 6 player is another World Cup attendee and someone you would no doubt all be familiar with if you watch my channel. That is Debre from Hungary. Debre achieved 5th to 8th position at the World Cup, topping my group. He has also won 1 of the normal tournaments and 3 of the seasonal tournaments in the Rainbolt tournament side of things. And I think what's interesting here is that out of the top 15 players I picked, he has played the least games, and that is because he spends so long mapping, including in the creation of his map, A Balanced World. So definitely a player with a unique skill set who knows a lot about bait rounds and this kind of thing, and just someone with an incredible knowledge of the game for sure. However, I still think there were 5 stronger players than Debre, and we'll get to those soon, but let me mention the 6 players who I think could have made a spot in the top 10, but who I just wasn't quite willing to go with. So the top player I think missed out here and who was somewhat held down by his mediocre World Cup performance was Juper. Juper is simply one of the most knowledgeable GeoGuessr players full stop, but he did not win any Rainbolt tournaments this year, nor did he place particularly highly at the World Cup, so I just couldn't justify putting him on here. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Juper actually knows more about GeoGuessr than anyone on the top 10. He is someone who is uniquely willing to put in the hours to learn stuff that other people are not willing to. Next player I had on the list was JHK. Now JHK has actually had a really nice year for tournaments so far, taking a total of 3 Rainbolt tournaments and being one of the best US players full stop. I actually had JHK on the top 10 because I do think if he went to the World Cup, he probably would have made it far, but as it stands, we don't really know how he would have gone under that pressure, and so I just had to leave him off. Another player I had just missing out was Topotic from Spain, just a super strong player all up, someone who I predicted may actually be able to win the World Cup. However, again, he came 8th to 12th, and so I couldn't quite justify putting him in the top 10. Castrola from Finland also missed out. He is probably one of the players who had the biggest rise in 2023. However, I'm pretty sure it was military duty that prevented him from attending the World Cup. I think if he did, he would have made it far, but as it stands, we don't really know. And he came out with 0 tournament wins for Rainbolt tournaments all up, so I couldn't really justify putting him any higher. Next up was Banana Man, a player, admittedly, I don't know all too much about. He's from the US, and he has accrued 2 tournament wins this year. I think this is a player who you could actually make an argument for top 10, and that's why I've put him here instead of the players to watch out for next year. But if I had to make a prediction, I would say he's a really good shout to make it onto the top 10 next year as well. It really could have been put higher this year. Now, I believe he is like 14 or 15 years old, so it might be a while till we see him in a World Cup tournament unless they change the rules. So yeah, he's just gonna have to prove himself in other ways, and definitely he is already doing so we'll just have to see. And my final pick for someone who could have made top 10, but I just couldn't quite justify putting there, was Mipt Dementor. He's from Russia, and definitely another player along with Juper who just seems to have an incredible knowledge of all the metas in the game. You tell him anything and he says he knows it, and he also had 3 tournament wins this year, so definitely someone who I could see squeaking onto the top 10. He also, I think, had the highest average rating on Rainbolt tournaments full stop over 2022 and 2023. So yeah, definitely someone who is solidly top 20 in the world, but just not quite at that standard in my opinion. Okay, now let's move on to the top 5. This is where it gets exciting. My pick for 5th best player in the world in 2023 was Boki from Sweden. Now, very disappointingly, Boki did not attend the World Cup, and he only got 1 Rainbolt tournament win for the year. However, you guys know how I love to go on about his 10 seconds no moving, panning, or zooming world record, which in my opinion is the most impressive world record of the year. And that wasn't his only world record, as he actually pulled another 6, which is the highest on the list so far. And Boki is someone who I don't really think we got to see his full potential this year, and now he's somewhat out of practice, unfortunately. But I think if you take the whole year in aggregate, you just have to include Boki this high, and I do think if you take all that into consideration, he is better than everyone I've mentioned so far. Okay, my number 4 pick for top player of 2023 is Radu C, my current teammate. So I remember when the Rainbolt tournament started up and everyone knew about RC. We'd all seen his YouTube videos, and a lot of people were doubting that he'd be quite as good upon his return. However, his World Cup campaign, and especially the latter half of 2023, have been quite dominant for RC. He's established himself as the best player in the world at Ukraine, at Bangladesh, at Peru, and then having a bunch of other specialties like Argentina and the US. And he's someone who, from playing with him, routinely pulls out metas where you're like, how do you know that? Or how did you even like think to observe that? Definitely on my entire list, I would put him top 3 in terms of pure talent. And yeah, his statistics back it up. He had 4 tournament wins so far in the Rainbolt tournaments this year, and he also had a 3rd to 4th place semi-final finish at the World Cup, where he was knocked out by Blinky, who eventually came 2nd. Okay, so my number 3 pick for the entire year of 2023 is Shimmy. Now, this actually may also be quite a controversial pick to have him so high, as he did not attend the World Cup. However, I think there is good reason to say this. Now, particularly Shimmy's dominance has come in the latter half of 2023, so there could be a little bit of recency bias here, but he has been instrumental in leading his team to their current lead in the Rainbolt tournament standings in the seasonal league. And he also has the most world records on this list with an impressive 11 solo world record placements. And And in addition to that, he also has 36,500 games completed, which is currently the highest amount out of any player at the beginning of 2024. However, players like Stekenberg probably across their accounts have had more in the past, but certainly we can say on one account he is probably number one. Regardless, Shimmy is someone who I really regard as being a contender for number one spot next year, and I really just think it's hard to argue with 36,000 games. You're just going to see a lot of a lot and end up with really good guesses, and I think that's exactly what's happened with Shimmy. My number 2 pick for best player of 2023 is Blinky from France. Now, of course, Blinky achieved second at the World Cup. He's pretty much undisputedly the best moving player on GeoGuessr, and over the course of 2023 made absolutely monumental strides in his no moving and no moving panning or zooming gameplay. When it comes to 5K'ing, even on no moving, you would have to put him as the best player in the world, and his knowledge of place names and stuff like that is really second to none as well. Now, I think if the World Cup format was a bit different and moving was not included, then I would have Blinky a little lower, because I do think the top 5 players here may have an advantage over him in the no moving formats. But as it is, the way I've been ranking things, I definitely think he deserves number 2. And I think along with RC, he's probably the most talented player on this list. Okay, well, no surprises here. My number 1 pick for the best player of 2023 on GeoGuessr competitive was Consus from the Netherlands. He, of course, was the champion of the GeoGuessr World Cup. He won 4 Rainbow tournaments across the year, and he really had a habit of dominating anything he participated in. In my opinion, he was clearly the best player at the World Cup. But then again, you have to consider he was very, very nearly eliminated by Fungus, and then maybe it would have been hard to put him number 1 if he was eliminated at that stage. However, the way he kept his cool in the moving games against Blinky in the World Cup finals was simply amazing, and Consus definitely strikes me as someone who does a lot of grinding in the background, so you never quite know how good he is until he really shows up on the big stage. So yeah, I don't really think there's too much of an argument. I do think Consus was the best player of 2023. Then again, it was not such a dominant year that you couldn't have picked anyone else feasibly, especially if the World Cup had gone slightly different. And so I want to say that the GeoGuessr landscape is very healthy competitively. Obviously, it's my intention next year to solidly be on this top 10, but really there's a whole bunch of people who could manage that. The old guard is kind of making way for the new, as a lot of people have been grinding a lot. So now let me mention some people who I think might go far next year. I've listed Kron, who's been grinding the game a lot. Lucas Pon, who has some of the craziest world records at the moment. Den, who's been making a massive mark in tournaments recently and beating some of the best players in the world. Antec, who by the way I had on this list before he went crazy on the weekend and won 2 tournaments. Lero, a fellow Australian, probably the best Australian player right now. My 2 good friends Armani and Finbar. Cheddarman, Malfunction, Kirania, another Aussie, and of course Mika, who is my ultimate prediction to be the best player in the world next year after he trains a little bit harder. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. I really want to hear who you guys would have in your top 10. Do let me know if there's anyone I missed, because it is always possible, but I think I'm pretty much on the money with these picks. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching the video all the way to the end. Give it a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in a video very soon. Till next time, and goodbye.